I stood in my Beacon Hill dining room at 6 p.m. on a Thursday, watching my 22-year-old daughter walk through the door with the girl who'd just spent $18,000 of my money in 6 weeks. Sienna Cross smiled at me like we were about to have a pleasant dinner, like she hadn't been posting photos all over Instagram, pretending my credit card charges were her family money, like she hadn't gotten my daughter's card number and decided expensive restaurants and designer boutiques were suddenly emergencies. Vanessa didn't know I'd found the statements yet. Didn't know I'd blocked the card 2 days ago. Didn't know Sienna had been declined at Valentino on Newberry Street in front of her friends and called my daughter screaming about the humiliation. What Vanessa did know was that her best friend needed defending, and I needed explaining. She'd spent the car ride over preparing her arguments about trust and independence and how I was sabotaging her friendships. I'd spent the last 48 hours preparing something else entirely. On my dining room table set with my dead mother's china and my grandmother's embroidered napkins sat 5 manila envelopes. Vanessa couldn't see them yet from where she stood. Neither could Sienna. Envelope 1 contained every highlighted charge. The lobster dinners when Vanessa texted me she was studying at the library. The Newport resort weekend. The bottles of wine that cost more than my mother made in a month cleaning office buildings in Dorchester. Envelope 2 held screenshots from Sienna's Instagram. Every post where she tagged herself at places I'd unknowingly paid for. Every caption suggesting wealth she didn't have. Every comment from friends asking how she afforded this lifestyle. Every response from Sienna claiming family money. My life. Hours I'd worked while my daughter grew up half-raised by babysitters because I was building a business. Traded for designer clothes on someone else's back. Envelope 3 was worse. I'd found Vanessa's laptop last weekend when she'd left it here after brunch. Found her messages. Found texts between Sienna and another friend named Tara. V doesn't even know I'm using her mom's card for everything, LOL. Girl is tragically desperate for approval. Does she know you're spending that much? She doesn't pay attention to anything except whether I still like her. It's honestly kind of sad. You're terrible. I'm practical. She's useful for now. Not like she's going anywhere major after graduation. Communications degree from BU? Please. But the message that made me throw up was the one about my husband. About Thomas. About Vanessa's father who died coaching her soccer team when she was 7. V was talking about her dead dad today, the teacher. She gets so emotional about it like it's been 15 years. Move on already. Some nobody who couldn't even afford good life insurance. If my dad died, I'd at least inherit something worth crying about. Envelope 4 showed Vanessa's own bank account, untouched for 4 months. Her trust fund from her father's life insurance sitting there while she lived entirely on my credit card. Money I'd been adding to since she turned 18. Money meant to teach her how to manage finances. Money she'd completely ignored because spending mine was easier. Envelope 5 was the nuclear option. A financial emancipation agreement my attorney had drafted yesterday. If Vanessa signed it, she'd get full control of her trust fund immediately. Every dollar. Complete independence. And absolutely no safety net. No more allowance. No more credit cards in my name. No more mom to bail her out when she made mistakes. She'd learn about money by drowning in it or swimming through it entirely alone. I'd given her an additional card on my account to teach her responsibility. A monthly limit we'd agreed on. Clear expectations. Trust. She was 22. A senior at Boston University, and I'd wanted her to feel secure while learning to be an adult. Instead, she'd handed that card to someone who saw her as a transaction, someone who mocked her grief, someone who calculated exactly how much access to my bank account was worth pretending to be her friend. And my daughter had been so desperate to belong, so hungry for someone to like her, so blind to what was happening, that she'd let it happen. Now they were both standing in my foyer. Sienna still smiling. Vanessa already defensive. arms crossed, ready for battle. "Sit down," I said. "I made lasagna, my grandmother's recipe. We're going to eat, and then we're going to talk." "Mom, if this is about the card," Vanessa started. "Sit down." Something in my voice made them move. We sat at my grandmother's table. I served them both, poured wine, said grace in Spanish and English the way my mother used to, asking blessings on food and family and the strength to do what needed doing. Then I started placing the envelopes on the table. "I'm going to show you both something," I said. "And then, Vanessa, I'm going to give you a choice. But first, you need to understand what's been happening, what's really been happening." I slid the first envelope toward my daughter, watched her open it, watched her face change as she saw the total, $18,347.82, 6 weeks. "I don't understand," she said, but her voice was shaking. She understood something. "Keep looking. Look at the dates. Look at the charges. Tell me how many of those you actually authorized." I handed her the second envelope. The Instagram posts. Sienna's entire manufactured life, funded by my American Express, packaged as personal wealth for 47,000 followers. Vanessa looked at Sienna. Something was cracking in her face. The beginning of understanding. The first hint of betrayal. "Sienna, what is this?" "V, I can explain." "Not yet," I said. "There's more." I gave her the third envelope. The text messages. Let her read every word, every joke at her expense, every calculation about how to keep her useful, every dismissal of her worth. Let her read what Sienna had said about Thomas, about her father, about the man who'd loved her completely and died too young and left a hole in her life she'd been trying to fill with friends who saw that hole as opportunity. Vanessa's hands were shaking, tears running down her face. She looked at Sienna like she was seeing her for the first time. "You said this about my dad." Sienna had gone pale. Her carefully constructed mask was falling apart. "Those messages were taken out of context. Tara and I were just..." "You called him a nobody. You said he couldn't afford good life insurance. You said I should move on from grieving my father, because at least if your dad died, you'd inherit something worth crying about." The silence was devastating. I handed Vanessa the fourth envelope. Her own bank statements, her untouched money. "You haven't used your own account in 4 months. You've been living entirely on my credit card while your trust fund sits there. Do you know what that tells me? That you don't understand what money means, that you think it's infinite, that you've never learned the difference between having enough and taking advantage." Vanessa was crying openly now. Sienna was frozen, calculating her next move, trying to figure out if this friendship was salvageable or if she needed to find her next mark. I placed the final envelope on the table. Let my hand rest on it. "This is a financial emancipation agreement. If you sign it, you get complete control of your trust fund right now. All of it. You become entirely independent. No more safety net, no more credit cards, no more mom. You'll learn about money by managing every single dollar yourself, with no help from me." "You're cutting me off?" Vanessa's voice broke. "No, I'm giving you a choice. Sign this and learn the hard way, or don't sign it and learn a different way. But either way, you're going to learn, because what's been happening stops tonight." I looked at Sienna. "You need to leave." "Mrs. Salinger, if you just let me explain. Leave, now. This conversation is between my daughter and me." "Vanessa," Sienna reached across the table. My daughter pulled her hand back like Sienna might burn her. "Get out! V, please, get out of my mother's house." The door closed. It was just us now. Mother and daughter. 5 envelopes between us. 22 years of trying to do right by her. One choice that would determine everything that came next. Vanessa looked at the emancipation agreement, then at me, then at the agreement again. "Why are you doing this?" "Yeah, Because I love you more than I love being right. Because you're standing at a crossroads, and you get to choose who you become. Because your father isn't here to teach you this, and I've waited too long already. Because that girl just spent $18,000 of my money while mocking your grief, and you didn't notice. Because you need to understand that money isn't just numbers. It's pieces of my life I traded away. Hours I could have spent with you. Time I can never get back. And you gave those pieces to someone who saw you as useful. I pushed all 5 envelopes toward her. So choose. Sign the agreement and figure it out alone. Or don't sign it and let me teach you what I should have taught you years ago. But choose now, because we're not leaving this table until you decide who you want to be. My daughter sat there crying, surrounded by evidence of her own blindness, holding a pen that could sever our relationship or save it, trying to understand how friendship and money and grief and trust had gotten so tangled she couldn't tell anymore which choices were hers and which had been made for her by a girl who saw her father's death as insufficient inheritance. The lasagna was getting cold. The wine sat untouched in crystal glasses. My mother's china held the weight of this moment, the way it had held the weight of 100 family meals before. And I waited to see what my daughter would choose. I've always believed that the truth reveals itself in the smallest details. A misplaced receipt, a credit card statement that arrives on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday. The way your daughter's voice changes when she's lying. Not dramatically, but just enough that a mother who's been listening for 22 years can hear the dissonance. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday in October when I found myself staring at my laptop screen in the study of my Beacon Hill brownstone, the room illuminated only by the harsh blue light of numbers that didn't make sense. Outside, Boston was doing what Boston does best in autumn, wrapping itself in a picturesque blanket of falling leaves and premature darkness, the kind of beauty that makes you forget, momentarily, that winter is coming, and it won't be kind. The statement showed 18,347, 82 in charges over 6 weeks. I read it 3 times. Then I opened a bottle of Merlot. Not expensive, just the kind you buy at the Trader Joe's on Boylston when you need something to steady your hands, and started going through each charge with the methodical precision I'd learned building my consultancy from nothing. Trade restaurant, $847.34. I remembered that night. Vanessa had texted me around 9 p.m. Studying late at the library. Don't wait up. Love you, Mom. The timestamp on the charge was 9:47 p.m. She'd ordered lobster for 4 people. Saks Fifth Avenue, Newbury Street, 1256, 78. The date was a Tuesday afternoon. Vanessa's political communication class met Tuesdays from 2 round to 4:30. I knew because I'd helped her register for it last spring, sitting together at this very desk, her father's photo watching us from the bookshelf like he always did. Valentino, Newbury Street, 3-47, 12. Designer clothing. The kind my mother would have worked 2 months to afford when she was cleaning office buildings in downtown Boston at night, while I slept at my grandmother's apartment in Dorchester. The list went on. Mistral, Atlantic Fish Company, Casablanca, a weekend at the Chandler at Cliff Walk in Newport, $492 for 2 nights. Wine that cost more than my first car. I'd given Vanessa the additional card on my American Express when she started her senior year at Boston University. A gesture of trust, a symbol that she was becoming an adult, that I believed in her judgment. We'd sat down together, right here actually, in this study with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the window that looks out over Mount Vernon Street, and discussed terms, about $1,500 a month for necessities, books, groceries, gas for the used Subaru I'd bought her junior year, maybe dinner out occasionally with friends. I trust you, I told her, handing over the platinum card with her name embossed beneath mine. Margaret E. Salinger, and Vanessa R. Salinger, my mother's middle name. Rose, living on in my daughter. I won't let you down, Mom, she'd promised. I believed her. Maybe that was my first mistake. Or maybe my first mistake was thinking that trust alone was enough to armor a young woman against the particular cruelties of wealth and status in a city that worships both. I closed the laptop, opened it again. The numbers hadn't changed. They never do, no matter how much you wish they would. My phone showed 2:43 a.m. I had a client presentation at 9. I should sleep. Instead, I did what I'd been doing for 15 years since Thomas died. I poured another glass of wine and walked through the house, touching the things that made this place a home, rather than just an investment property in one of Boston's most expensive neighborhoods. The brownstone was built in 1867. 4 stories of red brick and black shutters, the kind of building that appears in movies about old money, even though I'd bought it with very new money, earned one client at a time, one proposal at a time, one midnight work session at a time, while my daughter slept upstairs. The previous owners had been a banking family, third-generation Bostonians who'd sold it to move to Naples, Florida, after their children scattered to New York and San Francisco. I'd fallen in love with it immediately, not because it was grand, though it was, but because it had good bones, honest structure, the kind of integrity that can't be faked. Thomas would have hated it. He'd grown up in Southie when Southie still meant something rough and real, before the tech money pushed out the longshoremen and the dive bars became gastropubs. He'd wanted to stay in our Jamaica Plain apartment, the 3rd-floor walk-up where we'd brought Vanessa home from the hospital, where the radiators clanked all winter and the neighbors played salsa music until 2 a.m. "This is real, Maggie," he used to say, gesturing at the mismatched furniture and the water stain on the ceiling we kept meaning to fix. "This is actual life, not that Beacon Hill fantasy bullshit." He'd died 3 months before we could afford to leave. Aortic dissection while coaching Vanessa's soccer team. He was 39. By the time the ambulance arrived at Mass General, he was gone. The insurance money was modest. Thomas had been a high school history teacher, union benefits, but nothing spectacular. I'd been freelancing in marketing, picking up contracts where I could, trying to build something that might eventually pay for college. After he died, I stopped sleeping, started working, built a client list through sheer desperate momentum, turned grief into revenue. By the time Vanessa was 10, I had an office in the financial district and a staff of 6. By the time she was 15, I was turning down clients because we were overbooked. I bought the brownstone when she was 17, the year before college. "For you," I'd told her, though that was only partially true. It was also for me, proof that a girl from Dorchester whose mother cleaned toilets could make it to Beacon Hill. Proof that Thomas had been wrong, that the fantasy could become real if you worked hard enough. Now I stood in the kitchen, all marble countertops and stainless steel appliances, the kind of kitchen you see in design magazines, and felt like the fantasy was crumbling. I'd missed something essential, some crucial element of parenting that should have inoculated my daughter against becoming the kind of person who spends $18,000 in 6 weeks without mentioning it. The kind of person who lies about being at the library while ordering lobster on someone else's credit card. Or maybe I'd taught her exactly what I'd intended, that money solves problems, that wealth equals security, that the right address and the right clothes and the right restaurants can protect you from the world's casual cruelties. Maybe she'd learned my lessons too well. At 2:47 a.m., I logged back into my American Express account and blocked Vanessa's card. No warning, no discussion, just a single click that turned the rectangular piece of platinum in her wallet into useless metal. Then I went to bed and didn't sleep. The next 2 days passed in the peculiar fog that comes from pretending everything is normal while knowing it isn't. I met with clients. I smiled. I presented strategy decks about brand positioning and market penetration. I avoided calling my daughter. She texted Tuesday afternoon. "Lunch this week? Miss you?" I responded, "Busy week. Maybe next Tuesday. Okay. The emoji felt like a lie. Or maybe I was reading too much into Unicode characters because I'd spent 48 hours analyzing credit card statements and questioning every parenting decision I'd made since Thomas died. Wednesday morning, I was in a meeting with a potential client, a biotech startup looking to rebrand after a failed IPO, when my phone started buzzing. Vanessa. I sent it to voicemail. It buzzed again immediately. Again. Then a text. Mom, call me now. Emergency. I excused myself, stepped into the hallway of my office suite on the 32nd floor of One Boston Place, looked out at the harbor where ships were coming in for autumn, and called my daughter. Mom, what did you do? No, hello. No, how are you? Just accusation, sharp and immediate. Vanessa. Sienna just got completely humiliated at Valentino. The card, your card, was declined in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? The card. Not my card. Not even her card, which technically it was. Her name on it, alongside mine. The card. As if it existed independently of my bank account, my work, my life. Why was Sienna using your card? I kept my voice level, neutral. A trick I'd learned in client meetings. Never react to the provocation. Control the conversation through calm. Because I let her borrow it. She needed some things, and I said it was fine. You've always said I could use it for necessities. Valentino is a necessity. Silence. Then, you're being ridiculous. Sienna needed an outfit for an interview, and... An interview at Valentino? What kind of interview requires a $3,000 outfit? How do you... Wait. Are you tracking what I spend? Are you seriously monitoring my purchases like I'm some kind of child? I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative was crying. Vanessa, I'm not monitoring your purchases. I'm looking at my own credit card statement. The one that has my name on it. The one that's connected to my bank account. And yes, I noticed when $18,000 appeared on it in 6 weeks. Another silence. Longer this time. I could hear traffic in the background. She was outside somewhere. Probably campus. Maybe walking past the BU beach, that stretch of lawn where students sunbathe in September and slip on ice in January. That's not... I've been spending more, but that's not all me. I know it's not all you. The question is, why Sienna has access to a credit card in your name that's connected to my account? The question is why you thought that was appropriate. The question is why you're more concerned about her embarrassment than about the fact that you just spent more than some families make in 6 months. Oh my God, Mom. Here we go. The "when I was your age" speech. The "I grew up poor, so you should feel guilty" speech. I'm so tired of... Vanessa. I kept my voice soft, but something in my tone must have cut through her anger because she stopped. Come to dinner tomorrow night, 6 p.m., my place. Bring Sienna. What? Why? Because we need to have a conversation, all 3 of us. Mom, I'm not bringing Sienna to... Tomorrow, 6 o'clock, both of you. This isn't optional. I hung up before she could argue. My hands were shaking. Behind me, my office manager, Patricia, 58, mother of 3, the kind of woman who'd seen everything and was surprised by nothing, stood in the hallway with a concerned expression. Everything okay, Maggie? Family stuff. Nothing urgent. She nodded, accepting the lie because she was kind enough not to push. The biotech people are still in the conference room. Take your time. I took 3 minutes, stood in the hallway, looking out at Boston Harbor, watching a cruise ship navigate toward the airport, counted my breaths the way the grief counselor had taught me after Thomas died. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Then I went back into the conference room and delivered the best pitch of my career, closed the deal before lunch, came back to my office and did something I never did. I left at 3 p.m. I drove home through the kind of Boston traffic that makes you question every life choice that brought you to this city. Route 93 to Storrow Drive, Storrow to Charles Street, Charles up the hill to Beacon. 40 minutes to travel 4 miles. I could have walked it faster. The brownstone was quiet when I got home, the way it always was in the afternoon. My cleaning service had been there Tuesday. Everything gleamed with that sterile perfection that means nobody actually lives there. I kicked off my heels in the foyer, black and white marble tiles, original to the house, and climbed the stairs to my study. My laptop sat where I'd left it. I opened it, started researching. First, Sienna Cross. I'd met her maybe 3 times, always, briefly. Move-in day sophomore year. Once when I'd taken Vanessa to lunch and Sienna had tagged along. Another time when I'd picked Vanessa up from their apartment in Alston, that neighborhood of triple-deckers and college students where parking is a blood sport. I remembered her as pretty in that careful, constructed way. Blonde highlights that probably cost more than my first semester of community college. Expensive casual clothes, Lululemon leggings, Barber jackets, Golden Goose sneakers that looked distressed in a way that cost $500. A smile that was always a beat too quick, like she was performing friendliness rather than feeling it. Vanessa adored her. Now I pulled up Sienna's Instagram. Public account, 47,000 followers. I scrolled. Photos from trade. Best meal ever with my favorite people. Boston Eats Lobster Lover. The Newbury Street shopping trip. Treated myself today. Sometimes you just have to invest in quality self-care. Newbury Street. Newport weekend. Living my best life at the Chandler Rat Cliff Walk. Newport, RI Coastal. Living blessed. Every photo perfectly composed. Every caption carefully worded to suggest wealth without explicitly claiming it. The comments section was full of friends asking, "How do you afford this?" and "Rich girl life." Sienna's responses were strategic variations of "just lucky" and "family money." Babe, family money. My money. Money I'd earned by working 80-hour weeks while my daughter grew up half-raised by after-school. Programs and babysitters because I was too busy building a business to be home for dinner. I kept scrolling, found photos of Vanessa, always slightly in the background, slightly out of focus. My ride or die. Love this girl. Best roomie ever. But never the focus, never the star. Always the supporting character in Sienna's carefully curated life. Then I did something I'm not proud of. I opened Vanessa's laptop. She'd left it here last weekend when she'd come by for brunch, and started looking through her messages. I found them in her Messages app. Texts between Sienna and someone named Tara C. Sienna. Ugh, Vanessa wants to study tonight. So boring. Tara. Just tell her you're busy. Sienna. Can't. Need to stay on her good side. Her mom's credit card is literally paying for my life. RN. Tara. Wait, she's letting you use her mom's card. Sienna. She doesn't even know LOL. V gave me the number for emergencies. I'm just very creative about what counts as an emergency. Tara. That's insane. Does V know you're spending that much? Sienna. V doesn't pay attention to anything except whether I still like her. Girl is tragically desperate for approval. It's honestly kind of sad. Tara. You're terrible. Sienna. I'm practical. She's useful for now. Not like she's going anywhere major after graduation. Communications degree from BU. Please. She'll end up doing social media for some non-profit and living in Somerville. The messages continued. Days of them. Weeks. Screenshots of bills from restaurants. Suggestions for how to convince Vanessa to go shopping. Strategies for maintaining access to the card. And one more message from last month. Sienna. V was talking about her dad today. The dead teacher. She gets so emotional about it, like, it's been 15 years. Move on already. Tara. Harsh. Sienna. I'm just saying. Her mom's loaded now and she still acts like they're poor. It's like she doesn't even appreciate what she has. Some nobody who couldn't even afford good life insurance. If my dad died, I'd at least inherit something worth crying about. I closed the laptop, walked to the bathroom, threw up. When I was 7 years old, my mother took me to Mass at St. Monica's in Dorchester every Sunday. We'd walk from our apartment on Adams Street, 30 minutes in any weather because the tea cost money, and my mother saved every dollar she could. I remember sitting in the pew beside her, watching her mouth prayers in a language she'd learned from her own mother, watching her light candles for people she'd loved and lost. She never explained faith to me. She simply lived it, in the way she shared what little we had, in the way she forgave the landlord who raised our rent, in the way she kept working even when her hands ached and her back screamed. Forgiveness isn't for them, she told me once, after a co-worker had stolen her lunch from the break room fridge at the office building where she cleaned. It's for you. You carry around anger, mija. It gets heavy. Forgiveness lets you put it down. I'd stopped going to church after Thomas died. Couldn't reconcile a benevolent God with a 39-year-old man dying on a soccer field while his 7-year-old daughter watched. But my mother's words stayed with me. The notion that forgiveness was an act of self-preservation rather than absolution for the person who'd wronged you. Now I thought about those words as I printed out screenshots of Sienna's messages, as I printed the credit card statements, as I called my attorney, David Brennan, who'd been handling my business contracts since I started the firm, and asked him to draft something I never thought I'd need. A financial emancipation agreement? David's voice was carefully neutral. Maggie, are you sure? I'm sure I want options. Whether I use it or not, that's a different question. This is about Vanessa? Yes. You want to talk about it? No. He paused. Then, I'll have something for you by end of day tomorrow. Thank you. After I hung up, I sat in my study until the autumn light faded and the street lamps came on along Mount Vernon Street. Watched the city transition from day to night, from business to leisure, from the version of Boston that works to the version that plays. Tomorrow my daughter would come to dinner. Tomorrow I would show her what I'd found. Tomorrow I would offer her a choice that would determine not just our relationship, but the kind of person she would become. Tonight I just sat with my grief. Grief for the girl I thought I'd raised. Grief for the trust I'd extended and seen betrayed. Grief for my mother, who'd never lived to see this brownstone or meet her great-grandchildren, who died believing I'd figured out how to raise a daughter better than she'd managed in poverty. Maybe she'd been the one who'd figured it out after all. Maybe wealth wasn't the solution I'd believed it to be. Maybe it was just a different set of problems, dressed up in better clothes and living at a better address. At some point, I got up, made myself dinner, just pasta with olive oil and garlic, the kind of meal my grandmother used to make when there was nothing else. Sat at my grandmother's table using my grandmother's china, and wondered what she would have said about all this. Probably something simple, probably something true. She'd had a gift for that, for cutting through complexity to find the essential thing. The essential thing now was that my daughter was in trouble, not financial trouble, that I could fix with money. Soul trouble, the kind that money makes worse, not better. The kind that requires something harder than writing a check. It requires courage. It requires boundaries. It requires loving someone enough to let them be angry with you. Tomorrow I would try to love my daughter that much. Tomorrow I would find out if she could love me back. Thursday arrived with the kind of crystalline autumn light that makes Boston feel like a postcard of itself. I woke at 5 a.m. Not because my alarm went off, but because I'd stopped sleeping somewhere around 3. The kind of wakefulness that comes from dreading something you know is necessary. I ran 5 miles along the Esplanade, past the sailboats on the Charles River, past the early morning rowers cutting through water that reflected the sky like molten glass, the Harvard Bridge, the Longfellow Bridge, the city waking up around me in layers. First the service workers, then the commuters, Then the people who could afford to start their days slowly. By the time I got back to the brownstone, my lungs were burning and my mind was clear. I showered, dressed in jeans and a simple cashmere sweater, the kind of calculated casual that costs money but doesn't announce it, made coffee, sat in my kitchen and watched the morning light move across the marble countertops. At 9 a.m., I texted Vanessa. "Still on for tonight, 6 p.m. Please don't be late." She responded immediately. "We'll be there." She was bringing Sienna. Good. I needed them both present for this. I worked from home that day, something I rarely did. Took calls from my study, reviewed proposals, approved budgets, the mechanical work of running a business. Easy enough to do on autopilot, while my mind rehearsed conversations that hadn't happened yet. At 3 p.m., I started cooking. My grandmother's lasagna. The recipe existed only in my memory and in the muscle memory of my hands. No measurements, just instinct. Fresh pasta sheets from De Pasquale's in the North End. San Marzano tomatoes, ricotta mixed with eggs and fresh basil. Beef and pork ground together, simmered for hours with garlic and red wine. Bechamel made from scratch because that's how Nonna had done it. Because shortcuts showed disrespect to the meal and to the people you were feeding. This was the food of my childhood. The food my grandmother made on Sundays when the whole family would crowd into her tiny kitchen in Dorchester, when the apartment would smell like garlic and tomatoes, and love looked like making sure everyone had enough to eat, even when there wasn't quite enough to go around. I made enough for 6 people, even though only 3 of us would be eating. Old habit. In my family, you always made extra. Someone might stop by. Someone might be hungry. You never knew who might need feeding. The lasagna went into the oven at 4:30. I set the dining room table with my mother's china, the Waterford pattern she'd saved for years to buy, one place, setting at a time. The only beautiful things she'd ever owned. She'd given them to me the year before she died, her hands shaking as she wrapped each piece in newspaper. "For when you have your own family," she'd said, "para que recuerdes." So you remember. I remembered. 3 place settings, water glasses, wine glasses, linen napkins my mother had embroidered by hand, her initials in the corner, RCS Rosa Christina Salinger, my father's name, worn like armor, even after he'd left when I was 5. At 5:30, I opened a bottle of Chianti, poured myself a glass, sat in the living room and looked at the envelopes I'd prepared, stacked neatly on the coffee table. Envelope 1, credit card statements. Every charge highlighted in yellow. Envelope 2, screenshots from Sienna's Instagram, her digital performance of wealth that wasn't hers. Envelope 3, the text messages, printed in black and white so they couldn't be denied or explained away. Envelope 4, Vanessa's bank statements, showing her own money sitting untouched while she spent mine. Envelope 5, the financial emancipation agreement David had drafted. 10 pages of legal language that would sever my daughter's financial dependence on me completely and immediately. 5 envelopes, 5 different kinds of truth, 5 chances for Vanessa to understand what had happened and who she'd allowed herself to become. The doorbell rang at 6:07 p.m. I opened it to find my daughter standing on the steps with Sienna slightly behind her. Both of them dressed like they were going to a nice restaurant, rather than a reckoning. Vanessa in a black dress I didn't recognize. Probably new, probably expensive, probably on my credit card. Sienna in something designer and cream-colored, her blonde hair perfect, her smile already in place. "Hi, Mom." Vanessa's voice was careful, guarded. She knew something was wrong, even if she didn't know what yet. "Come in." I stepped aside. "Dinner's almost ready." They entered the way people enter a space when they're not sure they're welcome. Sienna looked around the foyer with the kind of calculated interest that makes you aware someone is cataloging the value of everything they see. The chandelier, the original molding, the Turkish runner on the stairs. "Your home is beautiful, Mrs. Salinger," she said, her voice bright with practiced charm. "Vanessa's told me so much about it." "Has she?" I didn't make it a question. We moved to the dining room. They sat where I indicated. Vanessa to my right, Sienna across from her. I poured wine for all of us, retrieved the lasagna from the kitchen, the ceramic dish heavy and hot, the smell filling the room with something that felt like memory. "Made solid. This looks amazing," Sienna said. "Did you make this yourself?" "My grandmother's recipe. I served them both, then myself. She came from Sicily when she was 16, married a man she'd met twice, raised 4 children in a 3-room apartment in East Boston. This was what she made when she wanted us to know we were loved." I said, "Grace." My mother's words, in English and Spanish, the hybrid prayer of a family caught between 2 languages and too many worlds. "Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty. Bendícenos, Señor, y bendice estos alimentos." Vanessa bowed her head. She'd heard this prayer 1,000 times, sitting at my mother's table, learning what it meant to be grateful for food and family and the small mercies of daily life. Sienna kept her eyes open, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Amen," I finished. "Amen," Vanessa echoed quietly. We ate in silence for several minutes. The lasagna was good. Perfect, actually. The way it always was when I took my time and did it right. The meat tender, the pasta fresh, the cheese browned on top exactly how Nonna used to do it. "Mom," Vanessa finally said, "are you going to tell us why we're really here?" I set down my fork, took a sip of wine, met my daughter's eyes across the table. "Yes," I said, "but first, I need you both to eat, because this conversation is going to take a while, and I want you to have your strength for it." Something in my tone must have registered because Vanessa paled slightly. Sienna's smile flickered just for a moment before she reset it. We finished the meal in near silence. I cleared the plates, brought out coffee, strong and dark, the way my mother used to make it, the way that says we're settling in for something serious. Then I retrieved the envelopes from the living room and placed them on the table. 5 manila envelopes, unmarked, identical. "What are those?" Vanessa asked, her voice thin. "The truth," I said. "In several different forms. I'm going to show you what I found. I'm going to explain why I blocked your credit card, and then I'm going to give you a choice. But I need you both to promise me something first." "What?" Vanessa's hands were clasped in her lap, knuckles white. "That you'll sit here until I'm finished. That you won't leave. That you'll look at everything I show you and really see it. Can you promise me that?" "Mom, you're scaring me." "Good," I said, and I meant it. "You should be scared. I'm scared. This is scary. Now promise me." "I promise." I looked at Sienna. "You too." She hesitated. Then, "I promise, Mrs. Salinger." I opened the first envelope and slid the credit card statements across the table. 6 weeks, I said. $18,347.82. That's what appeared on my American Express statement. That's what was charged to a card in Vanessa's name, but connected to my account. My bank, my money. Vanessa picked up the papers with shaking hands. I watched her eyes move across the highlighted charges, watched the color drain from her face as she understood the scope of what I was showing her. "I can explain," she started. "Not yet. Look at the dates. Look at the times. Look at the locations. Then tell me how many of these charges you personally authorized or even knew about." She looked. It took several minutes. When she glanced up at Sienna, there was something new in her expression, something like doubt. "Some of these I don't remember," she said slowly. "Some?" I kept my voice level. "Vanessa, look at the trade charge. September 15th, 9:47 p.m. You texted me that night saying you were at the library studying. $847 for a meal you told me you weren't eating. She looked at Sienna again. We went there after the library. I must have forgotten to mention it. For 4 people, lobster. 2 bottles of wine that cost $130 each. That's not dinner after studying. That's a celebration. What were you celebrating? Silence. I opened the second envelope. Sienna's Instagram posts, printed in color. The photos from Trade, from Newbury Street, from Newport. Each one with its carefully crafted caption, suggesting wealth and ease and a life bankrolled by someone Sienna was pretending didn't exist. "These are your posts," I said, sliding them toward Sienna. "Your photos, your captions. Family money, babe. Treated myself, living my best life. Except none of it was your money, was it?" Sienna's perfect smile had disappeared. She looked at the photos like they might bite her. "Mrs. Salinger, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But I'm not interested in explanations right now. I'm interested in truth. So here's a truth. Every single one of these photos was taken during an outing paid for with my credit card. Every designer item you're wearing came from my bank account. Every meal, every hotel stay, every bottle of wine. Me. Not your family. Not your money. Mine." Vanessa was reading the captions now, her face a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "Sienna," she said quietly, "did you tell people this was your money? V, it's just Instagram. It doesn't mean anything. Did you tell people this was your money?" Vanessa's voice was stronger now, sharper. Sienna looked down at her plate. "People assumed. I didn't correct them. That's called lying by omission," I said. "It's what people do when they want credit for something they didn't earn and haven't paid for. It's theft with a smile." "I never stole anything." Sienna's charm cracked completely. "Vanessa gave me permission to use the card. She said it was fine. For emergencies," Vanessa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I said you could use it for emergencies. And I did. That Valentino outfit was for a job interview." "A $3,000 outfit for an interview?" I leaned forward. "What kind of job requires that kind of investment? Or were you just enjoying the feeling of spending someone else's money?" Sienna stood abruptly. "I don't have to sit here and be insulted. You promised you'd stay until I was finished." My voice cut through her indignation like a blade. "Sit down." Something in my tone. Maybe the years of running a business, maybe the authority that comes from having nothing left to lose, made her sit. I opened the third envelope. "These are screenshots from your messages with someone named Tara. I found them on Vanessa's laptop, which she left here last weekend. I know I shouldn't have looked. I did anyway, because I needed to understand what was happening. What had happened to my daughter that would make her complicit in spending $18,000 in 6 weeks without mentioning it." I slid the printed messages across the table. Vanessa picked them up, started reading. I watched her face as she moved through them. The jokes about keeping her sweet, the mockery of her career prospects, the calculation behind their friendship. Then she got to the message about Thomas, about her father, about his death being inadequate because he hadn't left enough money behind. The sound she made wasn't quite a sob, more like the noise of something breaking inside. "Vanessa!" Sienna reached across the table. "Don't!" Vanessa pulled back like Sienna's hand might burn her. "Don't touch me." "Those messages, you're taking them out of context. Tara and I were joking. Joking about my dead father?" Vanessa's voice was rising now, years of grief compressed into fury. "Joking about how he was a nobody who couldn't even afford good life insurance? That's your idea of a joke? I didn't mean it like that." "Then how did you mean it exactly?" I kept my voice calm, but there was steel underneath. "Please, explain to me how mocking a man who died coaching his daughter's soccer team, who spent his life teaching history to kids in an underfunded public school, who worked 2 jobs so his wife could start a business. Explain how that's funny. I'm genuinely curious." Sienna's face had gone from flushed to pale. "Mrs. Salinger, I'm so sorry. I was venting to a friend. I never thought..." "You never thought Vanessa would see it. You never thought there would be consequences. You never thought about anything except what you could take from someone you viewed as useful. That's what you called her in these messages. Useful. Not your friend. Not someone you cared about. Useful." Vanessa was crying now, silently, tears running down her face as she continued reading the messages. I wanted to go to her, to hold her the way I had when she was small, and the world felt too big. But she needed to see this, needed to understand what had been done to her, and what she'd allowed. "Sienna," I said, "I need you to leave now." "Mrs. Salinger, please. If you'd just let me explain. Leave, now. This conversation is between my daughter and me." "Vanessa." Sienna turned to my daughter, desperation clear in her voice. But Vanessa didn't look up from the messages, didn't acknowledge her at all, just kept reading, tears falling onto the paper, making the ink run slightly. Sienna stood, grabbed her purse. At the dining room entrance, she turned back. "V, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. You have to know that." Vanessa finally looked up. Her face was ravaged, her mascara running, but her voice when she spoke was steady. "Get out of my mother's house." The front door closed a moment later. The sound echoed through the brownstone, final and irrevocable. Then it was just the two of us, mother and daughter, the table set with my mother's china, the smell of lasagna still hanging in the air, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down like the atmosphere before a storm. "Mom," Vanessa's voice broke. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was saying those things. I didn't know she was spending that much. She needed help and I wanted to be a good friend and I thought..." "I know what you thought." I moved around the table, sat in the chair Sienna had vacated, took my daughter's hands in mine. "You thought that being generous meant saying yes to everything. You thought that love meant never setting boundaries. You thought that if you gave enough, shared enough, trusted enough, people would see your value. Isn't that what you taught me?" The question was raw, accusatory. "You always said to be generous, to help people, to share what we have." "Yes, but I also should have taught you the difference between generosity and being used, between kindness and being taken advantage of, between trusting people and being blind to who they really are." I released her hands, opened the fourth envelope. Vanessa's bank statements, her own untouched money. "You haven't used your own account in 4 months, not for anything. Groceries, gas, textbooks, coffee. You've been living entirely on my credit card while your own money sits there. Money your father's death paid for. Money I've been adding to since you were 18. Money that's supposed to teach you how to manage your own finances, how to budget, how to understand that everything costs something." Vanessa stared at the statements like she'd never seen them before. "I didn't think about it," she whispered. It was easier to use your card. And you never said anything, so I thought it was fine." It wasn't fine. It was lazy. It was entitled. It was exactly the kind of behavior that lets people like Sienna see you coming from a mile away and know they can exploit you. The word exploit hung between us, harsh and true. "But I have one more thing to show you," I said, reaching for the final envelope. "This one's different. This one's about choices." I pulled out the Financial Emancipation Agreement. 10 pages. Legal language. The formal severing of our financial relationship. This document, if you sign it, gives you immediate and total control of your trust fund. Every dollar your father left you, every dollar I've added over the years, all of it, right now, completely yours. No more allowance, no more credit cards in my name, no more safety net. You'd be financially independent, completely. Vanessa took the papers with trembling hands, started reading. "You're cutting me off?" Her voice was small, disbelieving. "No," I'm giving you a choice. You can sign this and learn about money by managing it entirely on your own. Figure out budgets and rent and groceries and what things actually cost when they come out of your own account, or we start over, but with new terms, real terms. I took a breath. You attend financial planning sessions with me. Learn how to budget, how to invest, how to understand what money represents. Not just numbers, but time and work and sacrifice. You volunteer somewhere that teaches you what real struggle looks like, not for your resume, for your soul. And you learn to forgive Sienna. What? Vanessa looked up sharply. Why would I forgive her? After what she said about Dad, after she used me. Because forgiveness isn't for her. It's for you. I thought of my mother, lighting candles in St. Monica's, praying for people who'd wronged her. Your grandmother used to say that carrying anger is like carrying stones. It gets heavy. Forgiveness lets you put them down. But she doesn't deserve forgiveness. Probably not. But you deserve peace. You deserve to move forward without carrying around what she did to you. That's what forgiveness means. Not saying what she did was okay. Not inviting her back into your life. Just releasing the weight of what happened so you can heal. Vanessa was crying again, but differently now. Not the shocked tears of betrayal, but something deeper, older. I miss him, she said, her voice breaking. I miss Dad, every day. And I thought if I could just be enough, give enough, be the kind of person everyone liked, then maybe it wouldn't hurt so much. Maybe I'd stop feeling like there was this hole where he used to be. I pulled her into my arms then, the way I had 1,000 times before. Felt her sob against my shoulder. Felt 15 years of grief pour out in the dining room, where we'd shared countless meals, in the house I'd bought to prove we'd survived, to prove we could build something beautiful from the rubble of loss. Baby, I whispered into her hair, you don't fill the hole by making yourself smaller. You don't heal by giving pieces of yourself away. Your father, God, your father loved you so completely. He would be heartbroken to see you treating yourself like you're not enough, exactly as you are. We stayed like that until her sobs subsided into hiccups, until the autumn darkness fell outside the windows, until the only light in the room came from the chandelier above my mother's table. Finally, she pulled back, wiped her eyes, looked at me with a face that seemed younger than 22, and older at the same time. Teach me, she said. Please, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be someone who gets used because she's too scared to set boundaries. I don't want to spend my life giving myself away to people who don't see my value. Then we'll start tomorrow, I said. Financial planning session at 9 a.m., and we'll find somewhere for you to volunteer. Somewhere that needs what you can offer, not what you can spend. What about the card? Canceled, permanently. You'll use your own account from now on. You'll learn what things cost. You'll make choices about what you can and can't afford. You'll become financially literate, not just financially comfortable. She nodded, picked up the emancipation agreement, and slowly, deliberately, she tore it in half. I don't want independence, she said. I want to learn. I want to be better. Her voice caught. I want to make Dad proud. And you. I want to make you proud. Oh, baby. I took her face in my hands. I'm already proud of you. Not for being perfect. For being brave enough to admit you made mistakes. For being strong enough to want to change. That's the hardest thing in the world. And you just did it. We cleaned up together, washing my mother's china by hand the way she'd taught me. Carefully, with respect for what it represented. We wrapped the leftovers. Enough lasagna for Vanessa to take home, to eat later, to remember this night by. At the door, she hugged me one more time. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it, for not paying attention, for letting Sienna use me, for spending your money like it didn't mean anything, for forgetting what it cost you. I know. And tomorrow, we start fixing it. Together. She left just before 9 p.m. I watched her walk to her Subaru, watched her drive away down Mount Vernon Street, watched the taillights disappear into the Boston night. Then I went back inside, poured myself another glass of wine, sat at my grandmother's table and looked at the torn emancipation agreement. My daughter had chosen to learn, to grow, to become someone who understood that money wasn't just numbers in an account, but pieces of life exchanged for currency. Tomorrow would be hard. The conversations ahead would be difficult. Learning to forgive Sienna. That would take time, maybe months, maybe years. But tonight, in this moment, sitting in the house I'd built from grief and determination, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The thing about hitting bottom is that the climb back up reveals who you really are. Not who you pretend to be, not who you think you should be, but who you actually are when the pretense falls away, and all that's left is the choice between staying broken or doing the hard work of putting yourself back together. Vanessa showed up at my house at 8:47 a.m. the next morning. 13 minutes early. No makeup, hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a Boston University sweatshirt I'd bought her freshman year, back when the future felt limitless and full of promise. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, she was holding 2 cups from Thinking Cup, the coffee shop on Tremont. "Peace offering," she said. "Oat milk latte. The way you like it." I took the cup. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to. I paid for it with my own card, from my own account." She said it like a confession, like an accomplishment, like the beginning of something new. We sat at the kitchen island, marble countertops that had cost more than my mother made in a year, in a house that represented everything I'd worked for, and everything I was beginning to question. "I couldn't sleep last night," Vanessa said. "I kept thinking about those messages, about Sienna, about how I didn't see it. How could I not see it, Mom? How could I be that blind? Because you wanted to believe the best about her. Because you were lonely after your father died, and you found someone who made you feel less alone. Because we all have blind spots when it comes to people we want to love us." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "Did you know? Before you found the statements? Did you suspect? Honestly, no. I was proud of you for having a close friend, for seeming happy. I thought maybe you'd finally found your people at BU, found a place where you belonged. I was so focused on building the business, on making sure we were financially secure, that I didn't pay enough attention to who was actually in your life. You can't blame yourself for this. I'm not. But I'm also not pretending I got everything right. I gave you money when maybe I should have given you more of my time. I taught you to be generous, but not how to protect yourself. I showed you how to work hard, but not how to tell when someone's taking advantage of that work." Vanessa nodded slowly. "So where do we start?" I pulled out my laptop, opened a spreadsheet I'd been working on since 5 a.m., when I'd finally given up on sleep and decided to channel my anxiety into something productive. "Here," I said, turning the screen toward her. "This is your financial reality." The spreadsheet showed everything. Her trust fund balance, her monthly expenses, her untouched checking account, her student loan situation. Minimal, because I'd been paying her tuition. Her projected income based on entry-level communications jobs in Boston. "Your trust fund is currently at $127,000. That's from your father's life insurance, my contributions over the years, and modest investment growth. It's enough to give you a cushion, but not enough to live on indefinitely. If you're careful, it could be a down payment on a small condo in a few years, or emergency savings if something goes wrong. If you're not careful, it'll be gone in 2 years and you'll have nothing to show for it." She stared at the numbers like they were written in a foreign language. "That seems like a lot of money." "It does until you start breaking down what things actually cost. Rent in Boston for a decent one-bedroom? $20,500 a month minimum. More if you want to stay in a good neighborhood. That's $30,000 a year before utilities, before food, before transportation, before student loans, before health insurance, before saving for retirement. Entry-level communications jobs in Boston pay maybe $45,000 to $50,000 a year. After taxes, you're looking at maybe $35,000 take home. Do the math. She did. I watched her face change as the reality sank in. I'd be barely breaking even, or losing money. Welcome to how most people in this city actually live. Now imagine doing it without a trust fund, without parents who can help with emergencies, without a safety net at all. That's what your father and I dealt with when we started out. That's what Sienna was probably dealing with, which is why she saw you as a solution to her financial problems. That doesn't excuse what she did. No, but it helps you understand it. People do terrible things when they're desperate, or when they convince themselves they deserve something they can't afford, or when they're surrounded by wealth they can't access, and it makes them feel like they're failing. I pulled up another tab. This is your spending from the last 6 months. Before Sienna started using your card, you were averaging about $1,800 a month, reasonable for a college senior in Boston. Groceries, gas, occasional dinners out, some clothes. Then look at the last 6 weeks. The graph showed the spike clearly. From bottomed $800 a month to over $12,000. I didn't notice, she said quietly. How did I not notice? Because you weren't looking. Because checking your bank balance felt stressful, and it was easier to just assume everything was fine. Because I'd always handled the money and you trusted that I'd tell you if something was wrong. But, Vanessa, that has to change. You're 22 years old. You're about to graduate. You need to understand exactly where every dollar goes and why. I spent the next hour teaching her things she should have learned years ago. How to read a bank statement, how to calculate monthly expenses, how to build a budget that accounts for fixed costs and variable spending, how to save for retirement even when it feels impossible, how compound interest works, how credit card interest destroys wealth. She took notes, asked questions. At one point, she looked up with tears in her eyes. Dad would have taught me this stuff, wouldn't he? If he'd lived. Yes, he was obsessed with financial literacy. Used to say that the reason poor people stay poor is because nobody teaches them how money actually works. He would have sat you down at 16 and walked you through every single thing I'm teaching you now. I wish he was here. Me too, baby. Every single day. We took a break around 11, made sandwiches, turkey and Swiss on the good bread from clear flour. Nothing fancy, just fuel. Ate them standing at the kitchen counter while looking out at the small garden behind the brownstone, where autumn leaves were beginning to pile up. I need to tell you something, Vanessa said, setting down her sandwich. Sienna texted me this morning, multiple times. What did she say? That she's sorry, that she never meant to hurt me, that those messages to Tara were taken out of context, that she wants to explain everything if I'll just talk to her. Do you believe her? I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me wants to think that our whole friendship wasn't fake, that there were real moments, real connection. But then I think about those messages, and I feel sick. What do you want to do? I don't know that either. I'm so angry, but I'm also sad and confused. And she paused. You said I should learn to forgive her. How do I do that when I'm still this angry? I thought about my mother, about the way she'd forgiven my father for leaving, even though he never apologized, never explained, just disappeared one Tuesday afternoon and never came back. About the way she'd forgiven her employer who'd shorted her paycheck 3 times, the landlord who'd raised the rent during her cancer treatment, the world that had been so consistently unkind. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, I said. It doesn't mean you have to be her friend again or trust her or even speak to her. It just means you decide to stop letting what she did take up space in your heart. You acknowledge that she hurt you, you feel the anger, you grieve the friendship you thought you had, and then, eventually, when you're ready, you release it. You stop rehearsing it in your head. You stop imagining confrontations. You just let it be something that happened instead of something that's still happening. How long does that take? However long it takes. There's no timeline. But I'll tell you this. Holding on to anger hurts you more than it hurts her. She's probably already moved on to her next target, her next useful person. You're the one who'll carry this around if you don't find a way to put it down. Vanessa nodded slowly. I'm not ready yet to forgive her, but maybe someday. That's enough for now. Someday is a start. That afternoon, I took Vanessa to Sacred Heart Community Center in Dorchester, the neighborhood where I grew up, where my mother had cleaned office buildings and raised me in a 3-room apartment with walls so thin you could hear the neighbors arguing and making love and living their complicated, difficult lives. Sacred Heart served the neighborhood's poorest residents hot meals 5 days a week, a food pantry, after-school programs for kids whose parents worked multiple jobs, ESL classes for immigrants, job training for people trying to climb out of poverty. My mother had volunteered there every Saturday for 20 years, right up until the cancer made it impossible. She'd served food, sorted donations, helped with paperwork for people who couldn't navigate the system alone. It was her church even more than St. Monica's was, the place where faith became action, where prayers turned into hot meals and warm coats, and someone who saw your struggle and said, I'll help. I donated money to Sacred Heart for years, generous checks that let me feel like I was just honoring my mother's memory without actually doing what she'd done, showing up, getting my hands dirty, seeing poverty up close instead of from the comfortable distance that wealth provides. We met with Maria Rodriguez, the director, 63 years old, originally from Puerto Rico, with the kind of face that's seen everything and still chooses compassion. Margaret, she said, pulling me into a hug. It's been too long. Your mother would scold you for staying away so much. I know. I'm sorry. I've been busy. Everyone's busy. That's why we're always understaffed. She turned to Vanessa. And you must be Vanessa. Your grandmother talked about you constantly. Showed everyone pictures. She was so proud. Vanessa blinked back tears. I didn't know she volunteered here. Every Saturday for 20 years. Rain, snow, whatever. She'd show up at 7 a.m. to help set up breakfast. Stay until 2 p.m. to clean up after lunch. Never missed a week unless she was in the hospital. I didn't know that, Vanessa said quietly, looking at me. Your grandmother didn't do things for recognition, Maria said. She did them because they needed doing, because she remembered what it was like to be hungry, to be new to this country, to need help and not know where to find it. She gave us a tour, the kitchen where volunteers prepared meals for 200 people a day, the food pantry where families could get groceries once a week, the classroom where adults practiced English and learned to read, the room full of donated clothes and shoes and winter coats. In every space there were people. A woman sorting canned goods with 3 kids playing at her feet, an elderly man learning to use a computer, teenagers doing homework at a table with a volunteer tutor, all of them living lives that required more strength than I'd needed in years. We're always looking for volunteers, Maria said, especially people who can commit to regular hours, once a week, same day, same time. Consistency matters. People start to recognize you, trust you. That's when the real work happens. She looked at Vanessa. Your grandmother worked Tuesday lunch service. We've never really filled that spot the way she filled it, if you're interested. I am, Vanessa said immediately. I want to do what she did. I want to... Her voice caught. I want to understand what she understood. Maria smiled. Then come Tuesday at 10:30. Wear comfortable shoes and clothes you don't mind getting dirty. We'll put you to work. On the drive back to Beacon Hill, Vanessa was quiet, looking out the window at the neighborhood changing around us. From Dorchester's triple-deckers to South End's renovated brownstones to the pristine streets of Beacon Hill. 5 miles. A whole world of difference. Grandma never told me about volunteering there, she said finally. Why didn't she tell me? Because she didn't volunteer to be praised. She did it because it was right. Because she'd been on the other side of that serving line and she never forgot what it felt like. Because her faith taught her that how we treat the poorest among us is how we treat God Himself. Do you believe that? About God? I thought about it. I don't know what I believe anymore, but I believe what my mother showed me, that compassion is sacred, that seeing someone struggle and choosing to help is maybe the most important thing we can do, that we're all connected, even when we pretend we're not. I want to understand that. I want to feel that. I've spent so much time around people who only care about what you can do for them, what you can buy, how you look in photos. I want to be around people who care about things that actually matter. Then Tuesday's a start. The next week settled into a rhythm. Vanessa came to my house Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings for financial planning sessions. We went through her expenses line by line, canceled subscriptions she'd forgotten about, set up automatic savings transfers, created a real budget that accounted for actual costs. On Tuesday, she started volunteering at Sacred Heart. The first day, she came home exhausted and smelling like industrial dishwasher soap. It's so much work, she said, collapsing onto my couch. I had no idea how much work goes into feeding 200 people. My feet hurt. My back hurts. I'm pretty sure I have burns on my arms from the steam table. Do you want to quit? No. I want to go back Tuesday and figure out how to be less useless. By the third Tuesday, she knew people's names, knew which kids had peanut allergies, knew which elderly regulars liked their coffee with 3 sugars, and which ones took it black, knew the stories behind the faces, the woman whose husband had been deported, the man who'd lost his construction job after a back injury, the family living in their car while waiting for subsidized housing. Everyone there has a story, she told me over dinner one night. And none of the stories are simple. Nobody woke up one day and decided to be poor. Life just happened to them. Medical bills, job loss, bad luck, bad choices, systems that don't work. And they're all trying so hard, harder than I've ever had to try at anything. That's what your grandmother wanted you to understand. That poverty isn't a moral failure. It's a circumstance. And circumstances can happen to anyone. Vanessa was changing. I could see it in small ways. The way she checked prices at the grocery store. The way she said no to impulse purchases. The way she talked about Sacred Heart volunteers with genuine respect instead of the performative empathy I'd seen her use with homeless people on the street. But the biggest change was in how she talked about Sienna. I saw her on campus today, she said one evening in early November. She tried to talk to me, said she needed to explain. What did you do? I told her I wasn't ready, that I needed space, that maybe someday we could talk, but not now. How did that feel? Hard, but good. Like I was finally setting a boundary, like I was protecting myself instead of just going along with what someone else wanted. That's growth. I'm still angry at her. But I'm also starting to see how scared she must have been. How desperate. She comes from money that ran out. I did some digging. Her dad lost everything in 2008 and never recovered. Her family's been pretending they're still wealthy, but they're barely hanging on. She probably saw me as her lifeline. That doesn't excuse what she did. No, but it helps me understand it. And maybe that's the beginning of forgiveness. Understanding that hurt people, that she was acting out of her own fear and desperation, that it wasn't really about me at all. I felt something loosen in my chest. My daughter was learning what my mother had spent a lifetime trying to teach. That compassion doesn't require condoning someone's behavior. That you can hold people accountable and still see their humanity. That forgiveness is possible even when reconciliation isn't. 3 weeks after our confrontation dinner, David Brennan called. "The financial emancipation agreement," he said. "Do you still need it on file?" "No, tear it up." "Good. I was hoping you'd say that. How's Vanessa doing?" "Better. Learning. Growing up in ways I should have pushed her toward years ago." "You're doing good work, Maggie. Not every parent would have had the courage to confront this the way you did." After I hung up, I sat in my study and looked at the torn agreement still sitting on my desk. I'd kept it as a reminder of how close we'd come to severing something essential, of how easily love can curdle into enabling, of how hard it is to let someone you love face consequences. I threw it away. We didn't need it anymore. Thanksgiving arrived with that particular Boston combination of freezing rain and premature snow. I'd invited Vanessa for dinner, just the two of us, like it had been since Thomas died. A quiet meal in a city that never felt entirely quiet, where even the holidays carried an edge of ambition and striving. She arrived at 2 p.m. with a pumpkin pie she'd made herself. "It's probably terrible," she said, "but I wanted to try, to make something instead of just buying something." The pie was slightly lopsided and the crust was overdone on one side. It was perfect. We cooked together. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green beans. My mother's recipes, my grandmother's recipes. The food of generations of women who'd learned to make something beautiful from modest ingredients and limited budgets. While the turkey rested, we sat in the living room with wine and watched the light fade over Beacon Hill. The brownstone was warm and filled with the smell of roasting meat and fresh bread. Outside, Boston was preparing for winter. "I've been thinking about something," Vanessa said. "About what you said about forgiveness, about putting down the anger so it doesn't weigh you down." "Yeah, I think I'm ready. Not to be Sienna's friend again, but to forgive her, to stop carrying what she did around like a stone." "What changed?" "Working at Sacred Heart, seeing how hard life can be for people. Realizing that everyone's carrying something heavy, everyone's scared of something, everyone's just trying to survive in whatever way they know how. Sienna made terrible choices. She hurt me, but she was drowning, and she grabbed onto me because I was there, and I let her. That's on both of us. That's very mature. I learned it from you. And from Grandma, from watching how you forgave Dad for dying even though it wasn't his fault. From hearing stories about how Grandma forgave everyone, even people who didn't deserve it, because carrying anger was worse than letting it go. I felt tears prick my eyes. Your grandmother would be proud of you. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of me too. For the first time in a long time. She paused. I've been thinking about, after graduation, about what comes next. And I want to stay in Boston, get a job, probably something entry-level and not glamorous. Find a roommate, not Sienna, someone new, someone healthy. Live on my budget, use my trust fund for emergencies only. Keep volunteering at Sacred Heart. Build a life that's actually mine instead of just an extension of yours or a performance for social media. That sounds like a good plan. It sounds scary. Most good things are. We ate dinner at my grandmother's table using my mother's china, said Grace in Spanish and English, honoring the women who'd come before us and survived worse than credit card fraud and betrayed friendships. After dinner, while we cleaned up, Vanessa said something that made me stop, my hands in the sudsy water, my heart suddenly full. Thank you, Mom, for not just cutting me off, for not giving up on me, for loving me enough to show me the truth even when it was hard, for teaching me what Grandma taught you. That money is just money. But character is everything. That forgiveness is strength, not weakness. That the point of having enough is being able to help people who don't. I dried my hands, pulled her into a hug, felt her heart beating against mine, felt the years telescoping. The baby I'd held, the 7-year-old who'd lost her father, the teenager who'd been angry at the world, the young woman who was finally becoming herself. "You don't need to thank me," I said into her hair. "You did the hard work. You made the choice to change. I just showed you the door. You're the one who walked through it." Later that night, after Vanessa left, I stood at my study window and looked out at Mount Vernon Street. The street lamps cast pools of amber light on wet pavement. The brownstones glowed with interior warmth. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. St. Monica's probably, or Cathedral of the Holy Cross, calling the faithful to evening mass. I thought about my mother, about her faith that had sustained her through poverty and abandonment and illness, about her insistence that forgiveness wasn't optional, that carrying anger poisoned you from the inside out, that the only way to survive this world intact was to love people even when they disappointed you. I'd lost that faith after Thomas died. Couldn't reconcile a loving God with a 39-year-old man dying on a soccer field. Couldn't find comfort in prayers that seemed to bounce off the ceiling and disappear into silence. But maybe faith wasn't about churches and prayers. Maybe it was about what my mother had shown me, that you keep showing up even when it's hard, that you forgive even when it costs you, that you teach your children not just how to survive, but how to be decent humans in an indecent world, that you pass down not just money, but values, not just wealth, but wisdom, not just possessions, but the practices that make a life worth living. My daughter was learning those lessons now, learning that character matters more than clothes, that compassion is harder and more valuable than consumption, that the point of having enough is being able to help people who don't. And maybe, in teaching her, I was learning too. Learning to forgive myself for the years I'd prioritized work over presence, for the ways I'd let guilt over Thomas's death drive me to provide financial security at the expense of emotional connection, for believing that buying my daughter a house in Beacon Hill could compensate for the father she'd lost and the mother who was too busy building a business to really see her. We were both learning, both growing, both becoming people who understood that the weight we carry isn't just our own. It's generational, passed down through trauma and poverty and loss, through women who survived and taught us how to survive, through men who loved us and left us and shaped us, even in their absence. And slowly, day by day, decision by decision, we were learning to put down the stones we'd been carrying, to forgive the people who'd hurt us, to forgive ourselves for not being perfect, to build lives that honored the sacrifices of those who came before us, while creating something new, something honest, something real. Outside, Boston glittered with money and ambition, and the particular cruelty of a city that worships success above all else. Inside, in a brownstone bought with grief and determination, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of meaning. Not the end of the story, but a new chapter. Not perfection, but progress. And that, I thought, was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. 6 months later, on a Tuesday in May, I stood in the crowd at Boston University's graduation ceremony and watched my daughter walk across the stage, cap and gown, diploma in hand, a smile on her face that was real and earned and entirely her own. After the ceremony, she found me in the crowd, hugged me hard enough to lift me slightly off my feet. "I did it," she said. "I actually did it. I never doubted you. I doubted me. But I figured it out. We figured it out." She'd accepted a job at a nonprofit that provided job training for formerly incarcerated people. Starting salary, $42,000. She'd found an apartment in Somerville with 2 roommates she'd met through Sacred Heart. Good people, honest people. People who knew what struggle looked like and chose kindness anyway. She'd created a budget that worked. She'd built a life that was hers. And she'd done one more thing. "I wrote Sienna a letter," she told me as we walked through campus, dodging crowds of celebrating families. "I didn't send it. I just needed to write it. To say everything I needed to say. That what she did hurt me. That I was angry. That I felt betrayed. But also that I forgave her. That I hoped she figured out whatever she needed to figure out. That I was letting it go." How did that feel? Like putting down something heavy I'd been carrying. Like I could finally breathe all the way. We had dinner that night at a small Italian restaurant in the North End. Not fancy, just good food, made with care. We toasted with cheap wine and expensive gratitude. We talked about the future, about her job, about the life she was building. And at some point during the meal, I realized that the thing I'd been most afraid of, that I'd failed my daughter, that I'd raised someone entitled and blind and unable to navigate the world, hadn't come true. I'd raised someone strong, someone who could face hard truths and make difficult changes, someone who understood that money was just a tool, that character was everything, that the point of having enough was being able to help people who didn't. I'd raised someone my mother would have been proud of, someone Thomas would have been proud of, someone I was proud of. As we walked back to my car through the narrow streets of the North End, past restaurants and cafes and the smell of espresso and fresh bread, Vanessa took my hand. "Thank you," she said again, "for everything, for not giving up on me when I was being stupid, for teaching me what actually matters, for showing me that love sometimes means setting boundaries, even when it's hard. You're welcome, but you did the hardest part. You chose to change. We both changed. That's what made it work." She was right. We'd both changed, both learned, both grown into versions of ourselves that were more honest, more grounded, more aware of what we were carrying and what we needed to put down. And as we drove back through the city we both loved, complicated, beautiful, cruel, generous Boston, I thought about my mother, about her hands worn from work, her faith worn smooth from use, her heart somehow never worn at all. Despite everything that had tried to break it, she taught me to forgive, to persevere, to build something good from whatever materials I had, to pass down not just money but meaning, not just possessions but practices, not just wealth but wisdom. And now, in teaching my own daughter those same lessons, I'd finally understood what my mother had been trying to tell me all along, that the weight we carry isn't meant to crush us. It's meant to shape us, to teach us, to make us strong enough to carry other people when they need it. That forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the only thing strong enough to break the cycles of hurt that get passed down through generations. That love isn't just feeling. It's action. It's showing up even when it's hard. It's telling the truth even when it costs you. It's setting boundaries because you care too much to watch someone destroy themselves. And that the truest inheritance we can give our children isn't money in a trust fund or a house in the right neighborhood. It's teaching them how to build lives of meaning, how to treat people with dignity, how to survive this world with their souls intact. My daughter had that now, and in helping her find it, I'd found it again myself. The weight we'd been carrying, grief and guilt and anger and fear, was lighter now. Not gone, never gone, but lighter, manageable. A reminder of where we'd been rather than a burden that kept us from moving forward. And as we drove through the Boston night, past brownstones glowing with interior light, past churches with their doors open to anyone who needed sanctuary, past the Charles River, reflecting the city back to itself in fragmented beauty, I felt my mother's presence like a benediction. This, she seemed to say, this is what it's all for. This is what matters. The work of raising a daughter. The work of becoming someone who can forgive. The work of building a life that honors the sacrifices of those who came before while creating space for those who come after. The work of putting down the stones we've been carrying so we can use our hands for something better. The work of loving each other well. And in that moment, driving through the city with my daughter beside me, I knew we'd done it. Not perfectly. Never perfectly. But well enough. And well enough was everything. Your mother blocked the card. I tried to use it and got embarrassed, said my daughter's friend, thinking she could show off at my expense. When my daughter asked me why, I did something that left them both in shock.